Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We'll give everybody another minute or so to log on, and we'll be starting shortly. Thank you. We do want to be respectful of everybody's time today, so we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kathy Zadrinsky, and I'm a principal consultant here at BSI, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's webinar. Today's webinar is on OSHA's potential rule changes to the Lockout Tagout standard. And a couple things before we jump into the presentation. In order to minimize background noise, we have muted all the attendees. We do encourage questions and comments through the presentation using the function at the top. It's a little like a voice bubble with a question mark in it. That's your questions box. Please use that to ask any questions or to let us know if you're having any technical difficulties. We will help you through that. In introducing our speaker today, this is Mr. Randy Hines. He is a senior consultant here at BSI. He has more than 25 years of industry and consulting experience. He has experience in automotive, defense, biopharma, healthcare, foundries, and general manufacturing. Please welcome Randy Hines, and please take it away, Randy, with the Lockout Tagout presentation.
Thank you. Um, Thank you, everyone, for joining me, and good afternoon from Cleveland, Ohio. Whether you're from this time zone or another, welcome. If the Cavaliers, Cleveland Cavaliers and/or the Guardians have beaten your team at some point or another, my apologies, not really. And we were not going to talk about the Cleveland Browns. Uh, anyway, thank you for joining me. This is a topic that has meant a lot to me during my career. I joke around with my friends a lot that uh, safety is just a job. It's not a way of life, which of course is not true. I'm sure it is the same way with you guys as well. They don't believe me because I'm the guy that, will have the checklist when I check my scuba gear, or I'm the only one of the group that's watched the safety video on whatever excursion that we're getting ready to do. So I honestly can't turn it off. And this is one of those topics that I just can't turn it off. I've been in consulting now for 3 years, and I go to various different clients for various different reasons, and I always end up talking about lockout tagout at some point. It's just something that I just can't seem to shut off. There's just too many stories in my career that have a bad outcome to them, where someone was hurt, somebody was seriously injured, even death. And it's one of those things that's near and dear to me. So this topic matters a lot to me. So before we get into the agenda, let me just say that I'm not hard tied to anything that's on this that I'm presenting today. And what I mean by that is uh, that on one level, updating these standards sounds like a great idea. Sounds like something that let's do it. Let's incorporate new technology. On the other side of that is, however, then my brain says, I like the old ways. I like physically isolating energy sources, and that's still the best idea. So whatever you take from this, just know that for me, this is still a work in progress. I've done a lot of studying on it, but I'm a little indecisive with it. So feedback is always a good thing. So this webinar is probably more about me going on my journey for myself to discover what I might want to work or how I might want to work in a new environment where the regulation has changed. Do I want to be progressive, or do I want to be that old grumpy guy that we all know, that has been a safety professional for eons and says, no, I like it the old way. We did it all with binders and programs and trying to digitize everything. We saw those clashes then, and I'm still just trying to work through that. So let's get to the agenda. So what we're going to talk about today is we're talking about the background of the standard. Where did this standard come from? Where did 1910-147 come from? How did it originate, and what were some of the founding tenets of it? Um, we're going to talk about the request for information that OSHA put out. We're going to talk about what they were looking for, what prompted them to do that, and some different aspects as far as that goes. We're also going to talk about the public comments, some of the comments that have come in. There's 80 to 88 comments in there. I'd be remiss to say that I've read them all. I've read a few of them, quite a few of them. There's a lot there, and there's a lot of great points to take into consideration with it. And I'll try to whittle that down into someone that I thought was the most significant. Um, and then finally, we're going to talk about the current status. Where are we at with this potential new rule and what to expect next? So here's some background on the standard. Um, Back in 1970, um, OSH Act came into existence, and during that, there was no hazardous energy control procedures or anything during that OSH Act back in 1970. It wasn't until about 1982, 1983 when they decided that this was going to be an important thing. Um, but let me back up one thing before I go into that. I'm also assuming in this that everybody on this call has some relative knowledge when it comes to lockout tagout. This isn't a lockout tagout 101 course. We are specifically talking about uh, what the future changes to the standard might be. Um, you should probably know everything from what an authorized employee is to what an alternate procedure is prior to this class. Otherwise, this would be a 4-hour class, and I only have about 20 minutes, so I'm not going to get to all that. So going back to that, in 1982, OSHA issued a request to organizations to say to submit comments and solutions. They knew they needed something as far as hazardous control because they had been seeing it in since the OSH Act had been put in place, and they wanted to find out some new solutions or some solutions to the problem that they were seeing. During 1983, NIOSH published some guidelines called Controlling Hazardous Energy, and that's where it quoted that isolated and blocked meant. They defined that pretty exclusively, and that was ultimately what carried over into the actual 1910-147 standard. So, and and they also were interested a lot in how to block that flow of energy so it couldn't be reactivated. They specifically said they didn't want it to be reactivated by a foreseeable unplanned event. So um, after all of that, 1989 was they went through all those different discussions and everything else and put together the standard in 1989. 7 years, 8 years later, they decided that the lockout standard was finalized and they issued it as the regulation. Roughly 8 years after that, 1997, OSHA issued a look back review. A look back review is basically when OSHA issues this and says, hey, let's see how that standard is that we were doing. Is it really doing what we expected it to do? Is it doing what we want it to do? OSHA determined during that lookout or look back review that it was good. Nothing needed to be changed. They thought things were working well and left it the way it was. That's 35 years ago. 1989 was 35 years ago, which wow, that's a little scary for me because that's when I graduated high school. Anyway, um, it wasn't until May of 2019 that OSHA put out this RFI for public comment. An RFI is a request for information. So this request for information was put out in 2019, and basically the reason for that was that they had put out some variances when it came to the OSHA standard on some new technology that they had foreseen as it being a good thing, that they thought it was a good thing. And they thought, well, if this company has come up with these types of solutions to the problem, maybe some other companies out there have other solutions that also could be we should look at, and perhaps maybe we should change the standard and make it more modern. And I know a lot of you who have been in environmental health and safety for years have understand that some of the limitations when it comes to lockout tagout is difficult. It's tends to be pretty heavy administrative. Um, there's not a lot of technology when it comes to it. So, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So in June of 2023, the review of the standard um, was put in the Regulatory Review Commission's long-term review. What this meant is they probably got inundated with too much information and didn't know what to do with it, and now they're trying to sort through it. And that in June 2023, which is that's a presidential commission, the Regulatory Review Commission looked at it and said, "Yeah, we need more time." So after that, after that, it went to um, onto the potential for notice of public proposed rulemaking. That was supposed to be released in August of this year, which is the final stage before they actually issue it into being a new standard. So that was originally set about a year later, from 2023 to 2024 in August. That they missed that mark, which is not surprising. That happens often. Um, and now it's tentatively set for December of 2024. But there's no date on it, and then it doesn't appear that anybody's anticipating that this is going to get put out. So some of the things that some of the tenants we're gonna say that are on or some of the issues that came up in the RFI. There are three things that basically OSHA wanted to look at. The first thing is energy isolating devices. As you guys probably all well know, OSHA's definition of an engineering isolating device is listed here. And they specifically, when I highlighted it, they specifically eliminated or left off and said don't use push button selector switches and other control circuit types. Um, I hope you guys can hear me. Sorry, my headset just died. Um, So push button selector switches and other control circuit devices are, they've specifically said they're not energy isolating devices. Control circuits are, and we'll get into that a little bit later, on what those are and why they specifically eliminated them. Uh, the next thing they wanted to talk about is industrial robots. Industrial robots, here's the definition according to OSHA. It's not in the standard, but it is one of their definitions of what robots are. And OSHA is realizing that, hey, there's a lot of changes that have happened to industrial robots over the years. And they hope that they want to upgrade the lockout tagout standard, or could upgrade the lockout standard to include that. And finally, one of the things they wanted to look at was the impacts, and not only uh, the impacts of, and not only the impacts, but the what it's going to do to our industry if they go with risk assessments. Risk assessments have come out in the new ANSI and ISO standards when it comes to machine safety, and they want to really make sure or analyze how that'll impact companies if they have to implement it. So, um, some background on the current standard is the lockout tagout continues to be on the OSHA top test list of cited standards. Here are some reasons that we believe that is the case. You have human error, outdated or incomplete documentation, is difficulty maintaining compliance. One of the ones I see a lot is the annual review, the annual audit, and how it comes to that, how it takes to do that. If it's not reviewing procedures, then annually reviewing your authorized employees tends to be a tripping point. Monitoring and auditing is also another way or another reason why that standard um, gets cited a lot. Oops. So it's part of the RFI. The request for information is controlled circuitry devices. They specifically want to look at anything that's an approved component. Approved component would be a fail-safe solenoid or a fail-safe type relay or something like that. Don't know if it exists, but they want it out there. They're putting it out there to see if there is something like that exists. They want to evaluate it. Redundant systems. As one person put it in the public comments, and we'll talk about that a little bit, in those public comments, what's redundant enough? Is 2 times, 3 times? How do we address that? And then control reliability circuitry. How do we guarantee that it's going to work every time, all the time? So the very example that they list in the RFI, these 3 points are why they granted the variance, and I think it's why they want to put it forward that, okay, let's see if we should change the standard. There's the personal control of exposed employee. I have a picture here of a fortress key or a trap key, it's also called. How's that used? And in this case, with the employee takes it, it keeps it in his or her personal control. Does the system allow attempted startup? One of the things that I've been taught throughout the years is lockout, tagout, and try to start it. You always is, how do we verify that the machine is off? The best way to do that is try to start it. And then third, authorized employees were easily identifiable before the machine restart for obvious reasons. So IEC and ISO machine safety standards have incorporated the use of controlled circuitry, and that's kind of also, because these standards have also been, is incorporated in it, that they want to see if they should as well in the regulation. So when it comes to robots, we all know that there's a lot of robots that have changed in the industrial landscape. Conventional robots aren't just these robots stuck on a stand and behind a cage with interlocks and all of that other stuff. Robots now are collaborative. Robots now work alongside humans or can work alongside humans depending on what kind of robot you have. They travel down paths. They do all these different things. You also have multi control function by one operator who might not even be in the facility. The operator of that robot might be in a different facility and has many robots under their control. There's autonomous vehicles, wearable exoskeleton robots. There's a lot when it comes to this. And again, they're putting out this request for information for knowledge on these systems and how we might protect employees from it. And finally, risk assessments. ANSI Z20 244.1 and ISO standards have both added risk assessments to the lockout tagout part, and the standards are looking more for flexibility by using those risk assessments. We all are familiar with alternative methods. My opinion is they're trying to go to a risk assessment based thing where everything gets risk assessed, so you don't necessarily have an alternative procedure type thing. It's not a separate case. It's all in one. You're risk assessing everything that you're doing from a lockout tagout standpoint, and therefore everything gets risk assessed based on the hazard analysis of the equipment or the machine. So some public comments, here are some comments that came up that people had issues with or had some heartburn about. Um, and that is, how do we properly maintenance bypass and control circuitry if they do it falsely? That picture right there is a perfect example of a fortress key that was bypassed. And that comes out of the comments. They see these things rewired by maintenance. Different types of that controlled circuitry is then changed. How do we govern that? How do we maintain that? Where lockout, putting a padlock on an energy source, is the best way to do it. We'll solve that problem. How much redundancy is enough redundancy? Do we do it twice? Is it 2, 3 times? How many different types of circuits do we have to control, to have as a backup to control that? So, and then some of the risk assessments, a lot of them were based on economic impact on companies trying to conform to a risk assessment. Companies that have to go out and hire a company like BSI or something like that in order to conduct those risk assessments, because a lot of them talk about third-party assessments and having an expert do it for you. So what's the current status? Current status is we're on the public comment period is done. The notice of proposed rulemaking is supposed to be out in December. I don't think it's gonna happen. So when will it be released? Time will tell. As you all know, with the new election, the Trump administration getting into office, what impacts does that have? Traditionally, Republicans tend to deregulate versus more regulate. And so we kind of look back at some of the things that President Trump had done in his previous administration. And so previous administration, he had fewer inspectors and fewer inspections. He didn't downsize inspectors per se. He just didn't add any when it came to the amount of jobs being added to the workforce. But, having said that, the Biden's administration increased it by 11% in the interim between the two administrations of his. And then there's a lot of removed restrictions and regulations on employers. Well, having said that, though, I think there's a lot of benefit to analyzing for controlled circuitry. It has its benefits not only in safety, it could have some benefits in safety, I should say, and it has some benefits when it comes to cost savings for a company if they can actually comply with the standard and not have to overly have an abundance of administrative tasks in order to do that. So, having said that, we got about 5 minutes left. I know I kind of blew through that pretty fast. There's a lot of information there. If anybody has any questions, if you want to throw those into the question chat.
Randy, while we're waiting for the questions to come in, could you answer what items of lockout tagout do you see to be most out of compliance?
Oh, I alluded to it earlier. I think whenever I visit companies, a lot of them I find is procedures that are out of date. And that has a lot to do with a change, management of change. They'll move a machine from one place to another. They may upgrade the system, maybe the electrical system or the pneumatic system or whatever that is servicing that machine, make it newer, but they don't upgrade the procedure. And so, the lockout points are all different in different places. And so I see that a lot. The other one I see a lot is authorized employees who haven't been evaluated on whether they're conducting the procedure correctly. That has to be reviewed by a competent person, and it has to be done on a regular basis.
And that I don't, I see that one out of compliance a lot.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. So, what changes do you think are going to be of the new standard are going to be the most impactful to employers to reach compliance?
That's a good question. Um, I would have to say that the risk assessment is going to be the most impactful. Because right now there's a lot out there trying to write procedures for each piece of equipment in your facilities. And that piece of equipment in your facility is going to need, at this point, from what we can determine, a risk assessment. Um, that's a cumbersome job for anybody that's an EHS person, that's their own, the own specialist that's in that site. Um, and that's going to be a difficult task, especially if you're switching from a non-risk assessment based to a risk assessed based. I think it's going to be a lot, but it's done right. I think it's the most effective. I firmly believe in risk assessments, and I think if done correctly and they've done in the right way, with all kinds of the trades and everything else and maintenance involved, I think it's the best way to go about it. So, but I do think that one's going to be the most impactful. It's going to take the most time, the most resources, in order to do that correctly.
That'll be a huge impact to business, right? Because to your point, they may not have the right expertise on site, and then they got to go find the resources to do that. Interesting. Interesting.
Exactly. And then they still have the accident investigations. They still have all of the other programs that they have to stay up on as well. And it's going to be difficult for them to do.
Okay. Somebody is asking if we can send them a copy of the presentation to the
Absolutely.
attendees. Yes. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from folks? What what do you sense is going to be OSHA's penalty to business for noncompliance?
Hmm. For the new standard,
Yeah,
or you,
if the new standard were to go through, yes.
ah, that's a wow. This is purely hypothetical, but I would say the ultimate goal of OSHA is to not cite. I know some people believe that they're there to cite you and get you in trouble, but really their main mission is to not do that. And I think one of the drivers with this change in the standard is to lessen the amount of citations that are issued for this particular topic. Because what it means, if they're citing it all the time, that means there people are out of compliance, and people are in an unsafe mode in their mind. So if they can gear it so that it can be, you can be just as safe, but not out of compliance. That's their goal. And so I think actually citations should ultimately lessen. Maybe at first it might go up as people are trying to trying to get the standard implemented. But OSHA usually gives you plenty of grace period, and they often offer a lot of assistance in obtaining that. So I would have to say that they probably, you'll have a grace period, and then you'll have plenty of opportunity to get in compliance, and hopefully it falls off the top 10 list of most cited.
Great. We have somebody who's asking if this is taped for later viewing, and it has been, and we can send you the link for that. And they're asking Randy that you include your contact information, which we'll make sure that happens as well. So,
We'll do that.
okay. Well, if we don't have any more questions, we are right at the bottom of the half hour. I want to thank each of you for attending today's webinar. I hope you found it really interesting and helpful. Certainly, if you have any very specific questions, you're welcome to reach out to Randy directly and find out what you need from him. In the meantime, we will be capturing your contact information and sending you out the recording as well as the presentation. So thank you again for your time and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.